Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Let's go to her Prime Minister's statement now on the Chequers HM government agreement, we thought, on Brexit.
Mr. Speaker, I am sure the House will join me in sending our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Dawn Sturgis, who passed away last night. The police and security services are working urgently to establish the full facts in what is now a murder investigation. I want to pay tribute to the dedication of staff at Salisbury District Hospital for their tireless work in responding to this appalling crime. Our thoughts are also with the people of Salisbury and Amesbury, and my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will make a statement shortly, including on the support we will continue to provide to the local community throughout this difficult time. Turning to Brexit, Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to my right honourable friends, the members for Halton, Price and Howden, and Uxbridge and South Ruislip for their work over the last 2 years. We do not agree about the best way of delivering our shared commitment to honour the result of the referendum, but I want to recognise the work of the former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, for the work he did to establish a new department and steer through Parliament some of the most important legislation for generations. And similarly, to recognise the passion that the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting
Order! A very unseemly atmosphere. I want to hear about these important matters. And I think the House should. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. That the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting a global Britain to the world as we leave the European Union. And I'm also pleased to welcome my honourable friend, the member for Esher and Walton, as the new Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Mr. Speaker, on Friday at Chequers, the Cabinet agreed a comprehensive and ambitious proposal that provides a responsible and credible basis for progressing negotiations with the EU towards a new relationship after we leave on the 29th of March next year. It is a proposal that will take back control of our borders, our money and our laws, but do so in a way that protects jobs, allows us to strike new trade deals through an independent trade policy, and keeps our people safe and our union together. Before I set out the details of this proposal, I want to start by explaining why we are putting it forward. The negotiations so far have settled virtually all of the withdrawal agreement, and we've agreed an implementation period which will provide businesses and governments the time to prepare for our future relationship with the EU. But on the nature of that future relationship, the two models that are on offer from the EU are simply not acceptable. First, there is what is provided for in the European Council's guidelines from March this year. This amounts to a standard free trade agreement for Great Britain, with Northern Ireland carved off in the EU's customs union and parts of the single market, separated through a border in the Irish Sea from the UK's own internal market. No Prime Minister of our United Kingdom could ever accept this. It would be a profound betrayal of our precious union. And while I know some might propose instead a free trade agreement for the UK as a whole, this is not on the table because it would not allow us to meet our commitments under the Belfast Agreement that there should be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Secondly, there is what some people say is on offer from the EU, a model that is effectively membership of the European Economic Area, but going further in some places and remaining in the customs union for the whole of the UK. This would mean continued free movement, continued payment of vast sums every year to the EU for market access, a continued obligation to follow the vast bulk of EU law, no independent trade policy, with no ability to strike our own trade deals around the world. I firmly believe this would not honour the referendum result. So if the EU continues on this course, there is a serious risk it could lead to no deal. And this would most likely be a disorderly no deal, for without an agreement on our future relationship, I cannot see that this Parliament would approve the withdrawal agreement with the Northern Ireland Protocol and financial commitments, and without these commitments, the EU wouldn't sign a withdrawal agreement. Mr. Speaker, a responsible government must prepare for a range of potential outcomes, including the possibility of no deal. Including the possibility of no deal. And given the short period remaining before the conclusion of negotiations, the Cabinet agreed on Friday that these preparations should be stepped up. But at the same time, we should recognise that such a disorderly no deal would have profound consequences for both the UK and the EU, and I believe that the UK deserves better. So the Cabinet agreed that we need to present the EU with a new model, evolving the position that I had set out in my Mansion House speech so that we can accelerate negotiations over the summer, secure that new relationship in the autumn, pass the withdrawal and implementation bill and leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. Mr. Speaker, the friction-free movement of goods is the only way to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. And it is the only way to protect the uniquely integrated supply chains and just-in-time processes on which millions of jobs and livelihoods depend. So at the heart of our proposal is a UK-EU free trade area which will avoid the need for customs and regulatory checks at the border and protect those supply chains. To achieve this requires 4 steps. First, a commitment to maintaining a common rulebook for industrial goods and agricultural products. To deliver this, the UK would make an upfront, sovereign choice to commit to ongoing harmonisation with EU rules on goods, covering only those necessary to provide for frictionless trade at the border. This would not cover services, because this is not necessary to ensure free flow at the border, and it would not include the common agricultural and fisheries policies, which the UK will leave when we leave the EU. The regulations that are covered are relatively stable and are supported by a large share of our manufacturing businesses. And we would continue to play a strong role in shaping the European and international standards that underpin them. And there would be a parliamentary lock on all new rules and regulations, because when we leave the EU, we will end the direct effect of EU law in the UK. All laws in the UK will be passed in Westminster, Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. Our Parliament would have the sovereign ability to reject any proposals if it so chose, recognising that there will be consequences, including for market access, if we chose a different approach from the EU. Second, we'll ensure a fair trading environment. So under our proposal, the UK and the EU would incorporate strong reciprocal commitments relating to state aid. We'll establish cooperative arrangements between regulators on competition, and we will commit to maintaining high regulatory standards for the environment, climate change, social and employment, and consumer protection. Third, we would need a joint institutional framework to provide for the consistent interpretation and application of UK-EU agreements by both parties. This will be done in the UK by UK courts and in the EU by EU courts, with due regard paid to EU case law in areas where the UK continued to apply a common rulebook. This framework would also provide a robust and appropriate means for the resolution of disputes, including through the establishment of a joint committee of representatives from the UK and the EU. It would respect the autonomy of the UK and the EU's legal orders and be based on the fundamental principle that the court of one party cannot resolve disputes between the two. Fourth, the Cabinet also agreed to put forward a new business-friendly customs model, a facilitated customs arrangement. This would remove the need for customs checks and controls between the UK and the EU, because we would operate as if a combined customs territory. Crucially, it would also allow the UK to pursue an independent trade policy. The UK would apply the UK's tariffs and trade policy for goods intended for the UK, and the EU's tariffs and trade policy for goods intended for the EU. 96% of businesses would be able to pay the correct tariff or no tariff at the UK border, so there would be no additional burdens for them compared to the status quo, and they will be able to benefit from the new trade deals that we will strike. In addition, we will also bring forward new technology to make our customs systems as smooth as possible for those businesses who trade with the rest of the world. Some have suggested that under this arrangement, the UK would not be able to do trade deals. They are wrong. When we have left the EU, the UK will have our own independent trade policy, with our own seat at the World Trade Organization and the ability to set tariffs for our trade with the rest of the world. We will be able to pursue trade agreements with key partners, and on Friday, the Cabinet agreed that we would consider seeking accession to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Mr. Speaker, our Brexit plan for Britain respects what we have heard from businesses about how they want to trade with the EU after we leave, and will ensure we are best placed to capitalise on the industries of the future in line with our modern industrial strategy. Finally, as I've set out in this House before, our proposal also includes a far-reaching security partnership that will ensure continued close cooperation with our allies across Europe while enabling us to operate an independent foreign and defence policy. So this is not just a plan that is good for British jobs, but good for the safety and security of our people at home and in Europe too. Some have asked whether this proposal is consistent with the commitments made in the Conservative manifesto. It is. The manifesto said that, and I quote, "As we leave the European Union, we will no longer be members of the single market or customs union, but we will seek a deep and special partnership, including a comprehensive free trade and customs agreement," and that is exactly what the proposal agreed by the Cabinet seeks to achieve. What we are proposing is challenging for the EU. It requires them... It requires them to think again, to look beyond the positions they've taken so far, and agree a new and fair balance of rights and obligations. Because that is the only way to meet our commitments to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland without damaging the constitutional integrity of the UK and while respecting the result of the referendum. It is a balance that reflects the links we've established over the last 40 years as some of the world's largest economies and security partners. It is a bold proposal that we will set out more fully in a white paper on Thursday, and we now expect the EU to engage seriously with the detail and to intensify negotiations over the summer so that we can get the future relationship I firmly believe is in all our interests. In the 2 years since the referendum, we have had a spirited national debate with robust views echoing around the Cabinet table as they have on breakfast tables up and down the country. Over that time, I've listened to every possible idea and every possible version of Brexit. Mr. Speaker, this is the right Brexit, leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. A complete end to free movement, taking back control of our borders. An end to the jurisdiction of the CJEU in the UK, restoring the supremacy of British courts. No more sending vast sums of money each year to the EU. Instead, a Brexit dividend to spend on domestic priorities like our long-term plan for the NHS. Flexibility on services where the UK is world-leading. No hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland or between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. A parliamentary lock on all new rules and regulations, leaving the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy, the freedom to strike new trade deals around the world, an independent foreign and defence policy, but not the most distant relationship possible with our neighbours and friends, a new deep and special partnership, frictionless trade in goods, shared commitments to high standards so that together we continue to promote open and fair trade, and continued security cooperation to keep our people safe. This is the Brexit that is in our national interest. It is the Brexit that will deliver on the democratic decision of the British people. It is the right Brexit deal for Britain, and I commend this statement to the House.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of this statement and to share her condolences to the friends and family of Dawn Sturgis. We're over 2 years on from the referendum. 2 years of soundbites, indecision and cabinet infighting. culminating in a series of wasted opportunities, with more and more people losing faith that this government is capable of delivering a good Brexit deal, and that is just within her own cabinet. 2 years on from the referendum, 16 months on from Article 50 being triggered, it's only this weekend that the cabinet managed to agree a negotiating position among itself. And that illusion lasted 48 hours. There are now only a few months left until these negotiations are supposed to conclude. We have a crisis in government, 2 Secretaries of State have resigned, and still we are no clearer on what future relationship with our nearest neighbours and biggest partners will look like. Workers and businesses deserve better than this. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, this government is not capable of securing a deal to protect the economy, jobs and living standards. It is clear this government cannot secure a good deal for Britain.
That's right.
On Friday, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was so proud of her Brexit deal, she wrote to her MPs to declare collective cabinet responsibility is now fully restored. While the Environment Secretary added his own words and said, one of the things about this compromise is that it unites the cabinet. The Chequers compromise took 2 years to reach and just 2 days to unravel. Mr. Speaker, how can anyone have faith in the Prime Minister getting a good deal with 27 European Union governments when she can't even broker a deal within her own cabinet? To be fair, and I want to be fair to the former Brexit Secretary and the former Foreign Secretary, I think they would have resigned on the spot on Friday. But they were faced with a very long walk, no phone, and due to government cuts, no bus service either. So, I think they were probably wise to hang on for a couple of days so they can get a lift home in a government car. I also, Mr. Speaker, want to congratulate the honourable member for Esher and Walton on his appointment as the Secretary of State. He now becomes our chief negotiator on an issue that could not be more important or more urgent. But this new Secretary of State is on record as wanting to tear up people's rights. He said, and I quote, "I don't support the Human Rights Act. Leaving the European Union would present enormous opportunities to ease the regulatory burden on employers." And he is the one negotiating, apparently on behalf of this government in Europe. Mr. Speaker, this mess is all of the Prime Minister's own making. For too long, she spent more time negotiating the divisions in her party than she is putting any focus on the needs of our economy. The Prime Minister postured with red line after red line, and now, as reality bites, she's backsliding on every one of them. We were also given commitments that this government would achieve the exact same benefits and free and frictionless trade with the EU. Now those red lines are fading. And the team the Prime Minister appointed to secure this deal for our country have jumped the sinking ship. Far from strong and stable, there are ministers overboard and the ship is listing, all at the worst possible time. Mr. Speaker, if we look at the Prime Minister's proposals for the long-delayed White Paper, this is not a comprehensive plan for jobs in Britain and the economy the people of this country deserve. These proposals stop well short of a comprehensive customs union, something trade unions and manufacturers have been demanding. Instead, they float a complex plan that has already been derided by her own cabinet members as bureaucratic and unwieldy. The agreement contains no plan to protect our service industry, no plan to prevent a hard border in Northern Ireland, and also put forward the idea of regulatory flexibility, which we all know, Mr. Speaker, regulatory flexibility is a code for deregulation of our economy. The government's proposals will lead to British workplace rights, consumer rights, food safety standards and environmental protections falling behind EU standards over time. And none of this has even been tested in negotiations. The Chequers agreement now stands as a shattered truce, a sticking plaster over the cavernous cracks in this government. The future of jobs and investment are now at stake. Those jobs and that investment, are not a subplot in the Tory party's civil war. And at such a crucial time for our country, in these vital negotiations, we need a government that is capable of governing and negotiating for Britain. For the good of this country and its people, the government needs to get its act together and do it quickly. And if it can't, make way for those who can.
Mr. Speaker, I know the right honourable gentleman has been in this House for quite a long time and he will have heard many statements, and the normal response to a statement is actually to ask some questions. I don't think there are any questions anywhere in that, but nevertheless, I will...
Members on both sides of the House should try to calm down. There's a long way to go, and as is my usual custom, I would hope to be able to call everybody who wants to ask a question, so people don't need to chunter from their seats when they can speak on their feet. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just on I will comment on a few of the points that the right honourable gentleman made. He talked about removing standards and lower standards in a number of areas, including employment. As I said in my statement, we will commit to maintaining high regulatory standards for the environment, climate change, social and employment, and consumer protection. He said there was no plan in what I had said to ensure there was no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. In fact, the very opposite. This plan delivers the commitment for no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. At the very beginning of his response, the right honourable gentleman thanked me for early sight of my statement. It's just a pity he obviously didn't bother to read it. Can I also say... He says that this is 2 years on. This is the right honourable gentleman who said immediately after the referendum decision in 2016 that we should have triggered Article 50 immediately with no preparation whatsoever. He talks about delivery. Well, I might remind him that we delivered the joint report in December, we delivered the implementation plan in March, and now we stand ready to deliver on Brexit for the British people with the negotiations that we're about to enter into. He talks about resignations. Can I just remind him, I think he's had 103 resignations from his front bench. So I'll take no lectures from the right honourable gentleman. And when it comes to delivering on a strong economy, on jobs for the future, the one party that would never deliver a strong economy is the Labour Party, whose economic policies would lead to a run on the pound, capital flight, and the loss of jobs for working people up and down this country.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, whatever else one's view of this particular plan my right honourable friend has been talking about, I urge her not to accept any single recommendations from the leader opposite, as nobody else in his party does. Can I then, however, urge her to answer this particular question? As she lays this plan in front of the European Union Commission and proceeds on negotiations, could she tell me whether she believes that there will be any concessions offered to them or none?
Say to my right honourable friend, this is the plan that we believe is going to deliver on Brexit for the British people, but do so in a way that gives us a smooth and orderly Brexit and ensures that we can actually do all the things that we want to do in terms of trade policies around the rest of the world and the commitments we've made to Northern Ireland. When the White Paper is published on Thursday, my right honourable friend will see that there are a number of areas, such as in participation in certain agencies, where we're proposing a way forward, and of course there will need to be negotiations on that way forward. But this is the plan that I believe both delivers on Brexit for the British people, but does so in a way that protects jobs and makes sure that we have a smooth and orderly Brexit.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement, and can I share with her the remarks that she's made regarding Dawn Sturgis, and she knows the commitment that we have on this side of the chamber to work with her when it's important on matters of national security. I should start by congratulating departing Cabinet Secretary for leaving the EU for the whole 4 hours that he spent negotiating in Brussels during his time, and wish all the luck in his world to his replacement. He's going to need it. And then there's the departing Foreign Secretary. Mr. Speaker, he should not have been allowed to resign. He should have been sacked for being a national embarrassment. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's proposals are at best represent. It is hard to believe that it's taken the Prime Minister 2 years to put together a proposal. 2 years to put together a proposal and 2 days for our Cabinet to fall apart. There is, I believe, a majority in the House of Commons for staying in the single market and the customs union. Will the Prime Minister work with the rest of us to make sure that we can deliver on staying in the customs union and the single market, to deliver what is in the best interest of all our people? Will she stop kowtowing to our hard Brexiteers who are prepared to accept economic self-harm and the loss of jobs? Will she recognise that she now has to take on her extreme Brexiteers and work in the national interest of all the nations of the United Kingdom? The Prime Minister's proposal of a facilitated customs arrangement has been called by one senior EU official as the fudge of the century. The response of EU negotiators has been to see if the proposals are workable and realistic. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't hold my breath. The Prime Minister has again today in her Telegraph piece noted that the UK Government prepares to prepare for a no deal. Mr. Speaker, that is simply outrageous. To put the economy and jobs in such peril is a complete failure of leadership. Mr. Speaker, the absolute crisis which has engulfed the Conservative Party over the last 17 hours is a national embarrassment. As the UK inches closer to the cliff edge scenario, we see a government in chaos, a Prime Minister struggling to lead her party, never mind her government, and 7 resignations since the elections a year ago. The Prime Minister must see sense and accept the mounting evidence against a hard Brexit raised by opposition parties, the business community and the devolved administrations. Will she work with the rest of us to stay in the customs union and the single market to protect jobs and ensure prosperity?
The right honourable gentleman commented on the preparations for no deal. It is entirely right and proper for this government to make preparations for every eventuality because we are going into a negotiation. And it is right that we step up our preparations for no deal to ensure that we are able to deal with whatever comes out at the end of these negotiations. But the key question which the right honourable gentleman asked, and he asked it twice, was would I work with people across this House to stay in the single market and in the customs union? The answer is an absolute, unequivocal no. We are leaving the single market and we are leaving the customs union.
Sir William Cash.
How does my right honourable friend reconcile the Chequers statement with the recent repeal of the 1972 Act under the Withdrawal Act, and also with including the European Court of Justice and with democratic self-government in this country?
Can I say to my honourable friend that we have indeed, as he said, EU Withdrawal Act, repealed the European Communities Act, but we have also ensured that we will take into UK law, at the point at which we leave the European Union, EU law, such that we see a smooth and orderly Brexit. In the future, the European Court of Justice will not have jurisdiction over the United Kingdom. And this Parliament will make sovereign decisions. This Parliament will first of all make a sovereign decision when the withdrawal, the meaningful vote and the withdrawal and implementation bills are brought before this House as to whether this Parliament is willing to accept the deal that has been negotiated. And thereafter, it will be up to this Parliament to decide whether it agrees with any changes in rules or any laws that this Parliament wants to pass. That is the sovereignty, taking back laws, taking back control of our laws. That is what I believe people want, and that is what we will do.
Sir Vincent Cable.
First of all, congratulate the Prime Minister for effectively killing off the United States-UK trade agreement by agreeing to retain EU regulatory convergence, which of course the Americans cannot accept. But could I also echo the call she's just heard to say that now she's lost the support of her Brexit fundamentalists, now is the time to have a national consensus, the majority in the House, who do support our retaining membership of the customs union and the single market, the original common market, whatever name and label she wants to attach to it.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he refers, as the leader of the SNP did, to staying in the single market and staying in the customs union. We will not be staying in the single market. We will not be staying in the customs union. To do those would involve us keeping free movement, and that would not be keeping faith with the vote of the British people. There will be an end to free movement from the European Union into this country as a result of us leaving the European Union.
Anna Soubry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, can I commend the Prime Minister for this plan, and in particular, can I congratulate her on her leadership in the last few years? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said that she would listen to business, and she clearly has listened to business. However, there are concerns that there are no details about the government's plan for services. What more detail can we expect to hear in the forthcoming white paper?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, there will be more detail in the forthcoming white paper, but the point about services is that for a variety of reasons, not least because this is an important sector for the United Kingdom, we believe it is important to maintain more flexibility in how we're dealing with services. On the goods side, industrial goods side, businesses are very clear that they would continue to meet those EU rules regardless of the position that the government took, because they want to continue to export into the European Union. On services, we want to be free to ensure that we are able to put in place what we believe is necessary to maintain our key position in services, not least on the financial services, where the global financial centre of the City of London needs to be maintained into the future, and we will continue to do that.
Mr. Hilary Benn.
Speaker, the Prime Minister welcomed the new Secretary of State to his post. Can I join her in doing so and say that we look forward to seeing him appearing before the Select Committee very soon indeed.
You better call the meeting quickly.
The government has indicated that the facilitated customs arrangement, even assuming that the EU were to agree to it, a question about which there must be a great deal of doubt, would only be fully operational by the time of the next general election in 2022. Will the Prime Minister therefore now confirm to the House that in the light of that, the current transitional arrangement, which expires in December 2020, is inevitably going to have to be extended?
No.
John Redwood.
the Prime Minister is right to reaffirm that we are taking back control of our laws, our money and our borders, and I fully support that. But will she clear away the ambiguity or contradictions in the Chequers statement, which implies we would give the ECJ powers, we might pay money to trade, and we might accept their laws, and we might have their migration policy?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I'm sure that he has read the Chequers statement very carefully, but actually the Chequers statement did not say that. We will be ending free movement, as in any trade agreement which we would strike with any country around the world or with any group of countries around the world. There will be Mode 4 provisions on mobility of investors and businesses, but we will be able to set our own immigration laws, our own immigration rules for people coming here from the European Union. And we will be able to continue to set our own laws in the future. As regards the European Court of Justice, it is not the case that the European Court of Justice will have jurisdiction in the United Kingdom. It will not. Businesses and individuals here in the United Kingdom will not be able to take cases to the European Court of Justice. Matters here in the UK will be determined by the UK courts.
Nick Cooper.
The Prime Minister's plan is still a fudge on immigration, on the Court of Justice and on the customs facilitating
that the Brexit agreement reached at Chequers is consistent with the red lines and the Conservative manifesto. She wasn't challenged by that by the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, although he did say the government was in complete shambles and should stand aside. While they've been debating the Commons, some other developments. Kit Malthouse is the new housing minister, and Chris Eaton-Harris is the new minister at the Brexit department. He is a very strong Brexiteer. Kit Malthouse, of course, worked with Boris Johnson while he was Mayor of London. We have as yet to hear from the Foreign Secretary directly. Downing Street pre-announced that he was gone as Foreign Secretary before he could get his resignation letter out. Let's get more on that now from our senior political correspondent, Beth Rigby, who is outside the Foreign Secretary's official residence across St James's Park in Carlton Gardens.
Hi, Adam. Yeah, we're just outside Boris Johnson's residence. We're still waiting for him to come out, but I've spoken to one of his allies about what on earth has been going on this afternoon. There was a rush statement out from Number 10 about an hour ago, just before Theresa May went to the Commons, saying that the Foreign Secretary had resigned, but we have heard nothing from him. I've been told by an ally of his that he was planning to resign. He had told Downing Street that was his intention, and he was planning to make that announcement later in the day, perhaps after the Prime Minister gave her statement. But someone jumped the gun in Number 10 and put that statement out ahead of him doing so. It hasn't gone down very well with people, saying that well, someone's saying to me, Number 10 think they're terribly clever, but it's really bad behaviour. I'm told now that to expect the exchange of letters between the PM and Boris Johnson at about 6 o'clock tonight. We've heard nothing yet from him. I guess the big question has been, what does he intend to do now he's resigned? We've had Davis and Steve Baker, both in the Brexit department. Both of them said that they didn't want to see a change in leadership, that they wanted Theresa May to stay in post. They didn't think a leadership election, indeed a general election, was the thing that should happen right now, but they were both emphatic that they needed a change of policy. I'm told by a friend of Boris Johnson that he too has not resigned to take a tilt at the leadership, that actually he too has resigned to press for changes on the backbenches. So for now it seems that this is not an attempt to become the next Conservative Prime Minister, but rather it's an attempt to try and bounce May into changing her policy. I have to say that's only from one source, and we've yet to hear from the man himself. And you saw Theresa May in the chamber there. She was very clear. She is not moving on this Chequers policy. She said that she thought that this was the best Brexit policy for Great Britain. But these resignations has really now given the Brexiteers figureheads to rally around. And she's got not one but 3 scorpions on the benches now in the shape of David Davis, Boris Johnson and Steve Baker, and it's hard to see how this policy is going to survive some very difficult votes in the weeks ahead.
Thank you, Beth. Although important to say that Steve Baker and David Davis have both given their personal support to the Prime Minister continuing, Theresa May continuing as Prime Minister. Be interesting to see when we finally hear from from Boris Johnson, whether he also issues that personal endorsement. But let's go back to the Commons now, where Theresa May is answering questions following her statement. Sitting on the benches alongside her, Liam Fox, David Lidington and Andrea Leadsom and Gavin Williamson too, the Defence Secretary.
Which is good for the United Kingdom, and I believe it's a plan which the European Union will see will lead to a deep and special partnership that will be in both our interests.
Then Bradshaw.
I believe the Prime Minister to be a rational human being. So why doesn't she save herself, us and the country a great deal of misery and grief and put the option inexplicably ruled out at Chequers, the EEA plus option, to this House in a free vote?
Hear, hear. Say to the right honourable gentleman, as I indicated in the statement that I made, the reason that I do not think that the EEA plus option is right for the United Kingdom is because it does not deliver on the vote of the British people. That is our duty. It is our job as a government to deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for.
Mr. Wren-Paterson.
Speaker, the announcement that the government is preparing for a no deal, which is an inaccurate term for moving to world trade terms, on which we trade with the vast majority of countries of the world, is very welcome and sensible. Given the intransigence and the churlishness with which the EU has welcomed her very generous offer so far, what is the date by which she judges it's a drop-dead moment to state that the talks are not progressing and that we will definitely be going to world trade terms?
I'm sure my right honourable friend has been in sufficient number of negotiations to know that actually it is not sensible to try to put a date on it in the way that he has, these matters in the way that he has said. We have received a positive reaction so far to the proposals we've put forward. We will go into intense and pacey negotiations with the European Union. What I'm clear about is that when this House comes to look at the Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill, it needs to have sufficient detail about the future relationship to be able to make that proper judgment.
Angela Eagle.
Mr. Speaker, the oddly named Chequers Agreement fell apart after a weekend and is now the Chequers Disagreement as her cabinet disintegrates before our eyes. So can she tell this House how on earth she's going to persuade the European Union to agree to her disagreement when her own cabinet don't agree with it?
I say to the honourable lady that we have put forward the position of the UK government that has been received by the European Union as something on which there can be negotiations in the future, and we will go into those negotiations determined to deliver the best deal for Britain.
Mr. Damien Green.
Yeah. What matters even more than the agreement reached at Chequers is the eventual agreement that this country will reach with the European Union. And what matters about that is that it promotes jobs and prosperity by helping British business. Can the Prime Minister assure the House that in the details of what we will see in the White Paper on Thursday will be a clear commitment to as free trade as possible across the borders of Britain with the European Union to preserve the jobs and prosperity for the future of this country?
Well, I can assure my right honourable friend that maintaining that free trade across the borders between the United Kingdom and the European Union is important. That's why we have always said that we want as frictionless trade as possible with the EU. The plan I've put forward that the government will set out in the White Paper later this week will show how we can do exactly that, maintain those jobs, but also have the freedom to increase our prosperity with trade deals around the rest of the world.
Emma Reynolds.
Have any European leaders agreed to let the UK collect tariffs on their behalf?
No. We are putting forward the facilitated customs arrangement for the future. We're putting that forward as part of the negotiations for the plan for the future relationship.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Speaker, can I say to my right honourable friend how much we're looking forward to the publication of the White Paper on Thursday? Can she also undertake to publish the white paper that was set aside, the white paper months in drafting by DEX-EU under the leadership of my right honourable friend, the member for Halston, Price and Howden.
Can I say to my honourable friend that the white paper we publish on Thursday will be based on the work that has been done by DEX-EU over recent weeks and will, of course, reflect the decision that was taken by the Cabinet on Friday.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister says that under her plan we won't be subject to the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice. But the Chequers statement says that our courts will pay due regard to its case law and make joint references for rulings which will presumably be binding. The big difference is that after the 29th of March, there will be no Scottish judge and no English judge on the Court of Justice. Won't this be the very definition of being subject to the jurisdiction of a foreign court which her Brexiteers so oppose?
No, can I say to the honourable lady, and I understand that the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster actually has commented on this in a question that she asked in another meeting. Can I say to her that we will not be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice? That is one of the things that people voted for, and we will deliver.
Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said that we would not be hindered from doing trade deals. But at a briefing given by 10 Downing Street, it was explained that in signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there would have to be a carve-out because our obligation to follow the common rule book. Will my right honourable friend explain what obstacles there will be to trade and how this will work?
Can I say to my honourable friend, there are issues which we would look at in any circumstances as the United Kingdom in relation to standards and the way in which we wish to operate, which could lead to us not being able to undertake all the commitments that somebody might want in a free trade deal. We could tear up all our regulatory standards, but I don't actually think that's what we should do, and I don't think that's what this House would want us to do, and I don't think it's what the public would want us to do. So as we go forward, we will be making those trade deals. We specifically looked at whether the plan that we were putting forward would enable us to accede to the CPTPP, and it would.
Mr. Frank Field.
May I thank the Prime Minister for her statement. Might I join with my right honourable friend in welcoming the Brexit Secretary to his place? And might I ask that they find time to visit the elected political leaders of Europe to seek support for this plan rather than just depend on the bureaucrats in Brussels?
The right honourable gentleman is absolutely right. I myself am speaking to elected leaders across Europe. My honourable friend, the incoming Brexit Secretary, will be also out and around Europe, talking not just to leaders, but actually to politicians across Europe and, of course, in the European Parliament about the plan that we propose.
Ah, yes, a Lincolnshire knight, I think. Sir Edward Lee.
The EU says they won't tolerate cherry picking, but what I fear is that we've picked the wrong cherry for this reason, that we, by accepting a common rule book in goods, are locking ourselves into a sclerotic structure where the EU has an overwhelming trading surplus. Will this not severely constrain our ability to make our business more competitive and to undertake free trade deals? So the Brexit will no longer mean Brexit, it will mean the Commission, where we will have no vote, regulating our business forever.
No, can I say to my honourable friend that the position that he's set out is not the position for the future. I've been very clear that Parliament will be able to take these decisions about rules in the future. But the reality is, somebody said earlier that I'm dealing not with the theory, but the reality and the practicality of Brexit. The practicality of Brexit is that our businesses who want to export to the European Union will continue to operate to the European Union's rulebook in industrial goods. Just as, when we sign trade deals with other parts of the world, we will need to ensure that both sides are able to operate to the rules that are appropriate there. So businesses will continue to apply these rules regardless. By operating in this way, what we are able to do is to ensure that frictionless border between the UK and the EU, a frictionless border which is important to deliver on our commitments for Northern Ireland while maintaining the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom, and important in ensuring that we maintain the jobs that rely on the integrated supply chains that have grown up over decades.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has proposed a free trade area for goods, but the fact is our services sectors have been left out and left behind by this government. Tech UK, which represents 700 firms that employ over 700,000 workers in the technology sector, has said that a deal such as that she has proposed will reduce access to EU markets, will be confusing for consumers and add to complexity for business. Why is she ignoring these services businesses which make up most of the British economy?
This is not about ignoring services businesses. This is about seeing that services is one of the areas where we have great opportunities in our trade deals around the rest of the world. It is also about recognising the importance and the significance in financial services of the City of London and the importance of ensuring that we're able to have regulatory cooperation, but the freedom to be flexible in these areas.
Mr. Peter Bone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday mornings, I lead the listening team in Wellingborough. We have an hour's meeting when we talk about national and local politics, and then we go out and campaign for 2 hours. This week, the activists were so disappointed about what had happened at Chequers.
What did you tell them?
They were betrayed. They said they were betrayed, and they asked why. They asked why do we go out each and every Saturday to support the Conservative Party, gets MPs elected. And, sir, for the first time in over 10 years, that group refused to go out and campaign. What would the Prime Minister say to them?
Can I say to my honourable friend, first of all, that I'm very sorry that his activists did not feel able to go out and campaign. I would hope that they would campaign for their excellent Member of Parliament and be willing to support him on the doorsteps. This is not a betrayal. We will end free movement. We will end the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. We will stop sending vast sums of money to the European Union every year. We will come out of the common agricultural policy. We will come out of the common fisheries policy. I believe, though, that is what people voted for when they voted to leave, and we will deliver in faith with the British people.
Alison McGovern.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents who work at Airbus, Vauxhall Motors, Jaguar Land Rover, Unilever and many other parts of our modern manufacturing supply chain have had their voice heard, but they need to be heard more, because it's not just what was in the Chequers statement that they need. So will the Prime Minister say, when will she go further and accept that we need to include more in this deal and we need to be part of the internal market of the European Union?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, we're very clear that we won't be members of the single market. We won't be members of the single market because of the full set of requirements that that brings, including the free movement. She refers to Vauxhall. Of course, Vauxhall have announced that it will invest in a new manufacturing platform and boost production at its commercial vehicle plant in Luton. That will safeguard 1,400 jobs. There have been other positive announcements from the automotive sector, but we have recognised the integrated supply chains, and we've recognised the need for that frictionless trade across the border, and that's what this plan delivers.
Sir Nicholas Soames.
May I give the Prime Minister a message from mid-Sussex? To this end, that despite the slings and arrows inevitably, will she stick to her guns to deliver a Brexit that's in line with the interests of our people, of their prosperity and their security?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that that is exactly the aim of myself and this government, to deliver a Brexit that is smooth and orderly, that maintains the prosperity of this country, that indeed enables it to be enhanced in the future, but also maintains our important security cooperation for the safety and security of citizens.
Mr David Lammy.
When the Prime Minister took office, she said she wanted to bring the country back together, and I believe that she had the will of most people in this House and the country. 69% of British people now think Brexit is going badly. Her cabinet is horribly split. The government is split. The nation is more divided than ever. Our people will be poorer as a consequence of this deal that leaves out services. Will she now commit to give the people a second vote on this deal?
No, I will not commit to do that. And the reason I will not commit to do that is because the British people voted. This House, this Parliament gave the British people the vote. They made their choice, and they want their government to deliver on that choice. And I think, given that 80% of people at the last election voted for parties which were committed to delivering Brexit, that it's time the Labour Party ruled out a second referendum.
Andrea Jenkins.
Mr. Speaker, my constituency voted 60% to leave the EU. Within 48 hours of the Prime Minister's statement on Friday, I received over 300 emails, disheartened, dismayed and telling me that democracy is dead. Can the Prime Minister tell the House how does she plan to restore public faith to my constituents that this is not a sellout?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I think people across the country, from wherever they voted to leave, and I understand she has received comments not just from her constituents on this matter, or people from across the country, wherever they voted to leave, wanted to see an end to free movement. We will deliver that. They wanted us to stop sending vast amounts of money to the EU every year. We will deliver that. They wanted us to end the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in the UK. We will deliver that. They wanted to come out of the common agricultural policy. We will deliver that. They wanted to come out of the common fisheries policy. We will deliver that. We will deliver Brexit that people voted for, but we will do so in a way that ensures we protect jobs, maintain our commitments to the precious United Kingdom, the Union of the United Kingdom, and ensure we can go out and do trade deals around the west of the world, which will bring jobs to her constituency and others.
Stephen Doughty.
Mr. Speaker, the new Brexit Secretary has proudly advocated no deal, claiming we would thrive. He suggested we might have to abandon the common travel area with Ireland. He suggested scrapping the Working Time Directive. And in 2013, he voted against crucial police and justice cooperation across Europe that is going to be key to any security treaty policy. And if not, why did she appoint him?
The government policy is very clear. I've set it out this afternoon. The further details will be seen in the White Paper, and the Brexit Secretary looks forward to delivering on that government policy.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Will she assure me that we will not charge the EU for access to our markets any more than we'd expect to be charged?
Well, can I say to my right honourable friend that I think one of the key features of the facilitated customs arrangement, which people may not have seen, is that we would, of course, recognise that the European Union would be effectively taking tariffs for UK goods that would enter other European Union countries to come to the United Kingdom, and we would make sure that that was reflected in the arrangements that are made in relation to the facilitated customs arrangement.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
The Welsh Affairs Select Committee today report recommending continued membership of the single market and the customs union on the basis of evidence received about agriculture. If whoever is in government doesn't come to the same conclusion, we will all wake up on March the 30th without a functioning government and without a functioning deal. For all our sakes, when will the Prime Minister push for an extension to Article 50? This is a negotiation with people's livelihoods, not a game against the clock.
This is a negotiation which is of vital importance to the United Kingdom, to our future as global Britain, and which will, with the plan that we have put forward, be about protecting jobs and livelihoods for people across the whole of the United Kingdom. But we are not extending Article 50. We have a negotiation, we have a plan for that negotiation, and we will go to it at pace.
Sir Oliver Heald.
My right honourable friend agree with me that one of the reasons that companies have come to this country, and also that British companies have become involved in integrated European manufacture, is because we've had a settled rule book for more than 30 years about trade in goods. And does she agree with me, and I would like to thank the Cabinet for agreeing to this, that the proposal is right to protect that business and to ensure that we keep those jobs?
Can I say to my honourable friend that he's absolutely right that the rule book in relation to industrial goods has been broadly settled over a number of decades and is not expected to change significantly in the future. It is one to which businesses continue to work to that and would do so after we have left the European Union. So I think the position we've taken, which protects jobs, is absolutely right.
Mr. Chairman.
Can I beg the Prime Minister to think again? It is obvious, even for today's proceedings, all her hard work at Chequers, she actually is still imprisoned by a group of hard Brexit ideologues. Would she change her mind, speak to those who have a real desire for the national interest in withdrawing from the European Union, and take a rather different view, but for having a vote in Parliament on the Chequers agreement?
I say to the right honourable gentleman that he talks about operating in the national interest. That's exactly what the government is doing. It's exactly why we're putting this proposal forward. We will negotiate with the European Union on the basis of this proposal, and of course, in due course, Parliament will have its opportunity to vote through the meaningful vote and on the withdrawal agreement and implementation bill.
Mrs. Anne Main.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend refers to negotiations. And of course, negotiations is about give and take, and some people may think we have given rather too much, but I'm actually not sure that the European Union will take it. I think they want us to give a little more and a little more. Can I ask that she will recall Parliament over the summer if in those deep and pacey negotiations we are asked to give even more?
Can I say to my honourable friend, although I recognise the good intentions with which she asked that question, I suspect it didn't quite receive the full approval of the entire House.
Liam Byrne.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister should have sacked her Foreign Secretary some time ago as someone who put himself before his party. She now risks putting her party before her country. How can she possibly persuade us that she can negotiate with strength with Brussels when it is clear she leads a divided House and she's struggling to take back control of her cabinet, never mind anything else?
The Cabinet has agreed the position that the government is taking forward. He asks about the ability to achieve in negotiations. I simply point out that that is exactly what we have been doing at every stage in these negotiations.
In noticing the honourable gentleman member for Elmet and Rothwell, I note with approval that the bright shirt he's wearing is more reminiscent of Arsenal than of West Ham. Mr. Alex Shelbrook.
Well, thank you for that endorsement, Mr. Speaker. My constituency of Elmet and Rothwell contributes roughly about £500 million to the GDP of this nation through mainly small and medium enterprise manufacturing. My right honourable friend note and comment that indeed, the most important thing we must achieve is that those small, medium enterprises, which are the lifeblood of this country, are able to supply the big companies no matter where they're able to trade. And actually, this deal actually allows them to expand in all other parts of the world as well.
Oh, can I say to my honourable friend that that is exactly what this deal does, and also by ensuring that we will have that frictionless trade across the border with the European Union, and in the facilitated customs arrangement we've put forward, we're ensuring that those businesses that currently only trade with the European Union will have no extra requirements in terms of customs, so we're ensuring that we are not increasing the burden on those businesses.
Chris Brown.
In her initial letter to Donald Tusk notifying the European Commission that she wanted to trigger Article 50, she said that if there was no deal, there would be no deal on security. I don't think she was making a threat. She was simply stating the truth, the fact. But since then, the European Union has made it clear that they're not sure that they want precisely the same version of a security cooperation that we've talked about, and they're now saying we won't be able to be members of the European arrest warrant. Isn't this issue of national security as important as it was the day that she wrote that letter? And isn't it most important that we do get a deal, therefore?
Of course the issue of national security is important, and we want to maintain operational capabilities. We will be, as he will see when the White Paper comes out, in the security partnership that I outlined in my Munich speech and that we were putting further details on. We want to ensure that those operational capabilities through instruments and programmes and agencies are still available to the United Kingdom, and that will be part of the negotiations that we take forward, and a security partnership is an important element of our future relationship.
David Jones.
Could my right honourable friend say what distinction she would draw between a combined customs territory, which the Cabinet appears to consider desirable, and a customs union, which it doesn't?
I'm very happy to answer that question for my right honourable friend. In a customs union, it would be necessary to be part of the common commercial policy, which would not enable us to sign trade deals with other countries around the world. In the arrangement that we've put forward, we will be free to sign trade deals around the rest of the world.
Seema Malhotra.
The government's proposals seem to effectively seek to reproduce parts of the backstop proposal for the whole of the UK, but with a Swiss-style dispute settlement system. But could she answer this question, which is, what will her proposals mean for mutual recognition of health professionals' qualifications in order for health professionals to be able to operate cross-border?
That is one of the areas where, of course, we will be entering negotiations with the European Union. We want to ensure that we are able to see recognition in a number of areas in relation to professionals and professional services. But, of course, that is something that we have to agree with the European Union.
Mr. Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister knows my constituency of Wimbledon well, and they know her. They know her to be a lady of integrity and putting the national interest first. And she's done that in this deal, and I commend her for it. Many of them, businesses in my constituency, are concerned about non-tariff barriers. Can she confirm that this agreement overcomes their concerns and they'll be free to trade over those non-tariff barriers?
The point of the deal that we have put out and the proposal that we will be presenting to the European Union is that we can have that ability for free trade between the United Kingdom and the remaining EU 27. That's partly about the frictionless borders, but it is also, of course, about the standards and regulations that those businesses will continue to operate to.
Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's obviously disagreement in her own party essays in the Labour Party as what the people actually voted for in 2016. Isn't it time to clarify with the people themselves, rather than always guessing? And I do not, with respect, Mr. Speaker, accept that it's being said that the people have spoken. This will be a further question to the people once they have the final deal, and they should have the final say on the deal.
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, she talks about disagreement. The biggest disagreement, of course, is between the Liberal Democrats and the people of this country who voted to leave the European Union.
Mr. Kenneth Clark.
Mr. Speaker, may I warmly congratulate my Prime Minister on the progress that she made at the weekend at Chequers and wish her well in the difficult few days that will no doubt lie ahead before we see the further details in the white paper, I trust. And is she now confident that the leaders of the other 27 European governments involved will accept this as a reasonable starting position for negotiations based on the realities of business and trade in the modern world, and ask them to speed up as far as possible the serious negotiations that must now begin, with no doubt some modest compromises on both sides before we reach a successful conclusion?
Well, can I reassure my right honourable and learned friend that the responses that I've received so far from other European Union leaders are that they have responded positively to the proposals that we have put forward, and indeed at the June European Council, the European Council at 27 agreed that we needed to increase the pace of the negotiations in the future.
Pat McFadden.
Speaker, on the 18th of December, the Prime Minister told the House, and I quote, "We will be going in and negotiating for services and for goods." We trade at an annual surplus of £28 billion in services with the European Union. Why is it, other than the reasons of internal politics and ideology within the Conservative Party, that she has taken the profit-making trade part of the UK economy and thrown it under the Brexit bus?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that that is not correct? What we are doing is ensuring that we have the flexibility in relation to services. As we look around the rest of the world, it will be services that will be a significant element of our trade agreements with the rest of the world. It will be in services that we will be able to benefit. We want that flexibility, and that is precisely what we are negotiating for.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has always been very clear that she seeks a bespoke relationship between the EU and the UK. There are only 9 meetings left at the European Parliament in Strasbourg before we will have left. Can I urge the Prime Minister and members of the Cabinet to keep focused on the timetable and deliver that deal?
Can I thank my honourable friend for pointing that out? We will indeed be focused on the timetable, both in negotiations with the European Union, but also recognising the role the European Parliament will play, because they will need to agree and the withdrawal agreement when it has been finalised.
Mike Gapes.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been struggling quite cleverly within the constraints of her self-imposed chains and red lines. Wouldn't it be a bit easier for her if she acted, as was the case in the 1941 crisis, the way that Clement Attlee acted, and we worked in the national interest together to deal with this crisis? Because carrying on as we are will not succeed, and she knows it.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that the government has put forward a proposal in the national interest, but there are differences across this House. It's been obvious from a number of members of the opposition benches who want us to stay in a customs union, want us to stay in a single market, which in my view would not be keeping faith with the vote of the British people.
John Barron.
Generally accepted that the EU has a poor track record on trade deals because, in large part, because of its protectionist rules and regulations. Does the Prime Minister accept that in pursuing a common rule book and promising harmonisation, we would be obliging imports from third countries to abide by those same regulations and therefore make trade deals more difficult to achieve?
Can I say to my honourable friend, as I said earlier, of course we could tear up regulatory standards that we have here in the United Kingdom, but I don't believe that would be the right thing to do, and I don't believe that that would be something that this House would support. Of course, when we look at trade deals around the rest of the world, as in any trade deal, there will be decisions to be taken about the basis on which that trade can go forward and the sort of standards that both sides will apply in those trade deals. But I believe it's right that the United Kingdom maintains a high regulatory standards in a number of areas.
Mrs. Ellen Goodman.
Mr. Speaker, the customs and trade bills were both drafted several months ago. In the Chequers agreement, the Prime Minister has set out a rather complicated new customs arrangement. Will this need any changes to the legislation that the House is going to be considering next week?
No, I don't believe it will.
Prime Minister. Mr. Crispin Blunt.
It's just over 16 months since the then Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously, Leavers and Remainers together, concluded that in July 2016 we concluded that the previous government's decision not to instruct key departments to prepare for a leave vote in the EU referendum amounted to gross negligence. Making an equivalent mistake would constitute a serious dereliction of duty by the present administration. Does my right honourable friend understand the relief now that the no-deal preparations are going to be overt, and will she ensure that the resources and commitments that may have been absent from these preparations are now given to this very important task to show the steel in our position?
Can I say to my honourable friend that we have, of course, as he I'm sure will know, allocated a significant amount of money, £3 billion over 2 years, £1.5 billion of which I believe has already been allocated to departments to do their work on preparing for leaving the European Union. Of course, some of that work will relate to what might be necessary in getting a deal, and other will relate to what would be necessary in a no deal. Work has been undertaken by departments already, but we are now stepping up the pace of that work and the intensity of that work.
Mrs. Mary Cray.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday night after the Chequers meeting, she announced unanimous cabinet support and reaffirmed the principle of collective responsibility. After the resignation of 2 of her cabinet today, it now looks like she could have a hat-trick by close of play. So has she appointed a new Foreign Secretary, and if so, who is it?
Well, can I say to the honourable lady that I have actually been in the chamber for quite a time since the resignation of the Foreign Secretary. I will be appointing a new Foreign Secretary in due course.
Mr. Andrew Selou.
Speaker. In South West Bedfordshire, small businesses are also the lifeblood of our economy. My constituent started his 4 years ago. It turns over 4 million and moves high-value capital equipment across EU-UK borders at short notice on a daily basis. Before Friday, he feared for the future of his business. Friday's agreement gives him hope. I ask her to maintain her resolve to help him and men and women like him across our United Kingdom.
Well, honourable friend is absolutely right that small businesses form the backbone of our economy, and it is right that we have heard from businesses large and small about their...
Well, the Prime Minister continuing her stout defence of the Chequers agreement on Brexit, and a reminder there from Labour's Mary Cray that Britain currently has no Foreign Secretary because Boris Johnson resigned this afternoon at 3 o'clock. In fact, what happened was the government suggested that he was going to resign, confirmed that he was going to resign before he was able to put out his resignation letter. Mr. Johnson is now seemingly at bay on the final day in his official residence in Carlton Gardens. And our correspondent, Beth Rigby, our senior political correspondent, is there, Beth.
In Johnston to come. We've heard nothing from him since Dan Street jumped the gun, and a statement before the Foreign Secretary was ready, or former Foreign Secretary, saying that Johnson...
Beth, apologies to you. We'll try and get the signal from Carlton Gardens sorted out. Let's go to Tom Rayner, who is in Downing Street.
Yes, Adam. Well, I think...
New Foreign Secretary is going to be?
I'm sorry, Adam, could you just repeat the question there?
Any guess who the new Foreign Secretary is going to be?
Well, we did see some commotion around the back entrance to the Foreign Office during that statement, wondering whether it might be someone who's not sitting on the front bench. In the end, it was simply Mark Regev, the Israeli ambassador. So I think there's lots of speculation, people talking about the possibility of Michael Gove, also suggestions that David Liddington, who is Theresa May's effective deputy, could be in line for that job. But I think the big news, Adam, that has come out from the Prime Minister's official spokesman since in the last 20 minutes or so while that statement was going on, is that if Theresa May does face a leadership challenge, she will fight it. He confirmed that she would be prepared to fight any leadership challenge were enough letters submitted to the chair of the 1922 Committee of Backbench Conservative MPs to start that process. Now, in some ways, Adam, it is the case that perhaps there's no other answer. The Prime Minister's official spokesman couldn't exactly say, no, she wouldn't fight it, because that it's almost an impossible response to give. But nonetheless, it's a big moment because it suggests that Theresa May is squaring up and trying to face down this rebellion. Clear from that statement that she gave in the House of Commons that she was not prepared to budge on this. If an ultimatum has been issued by senior Brexiteers to say you need to change or dump the Chequers proposals, otherwise you will face further resignations and a leadership challenge. What we heard, I think, in that House of Commons statement that she has delivered and is still perhaps delivering, I can't see from here, is that she is prepared to fight on, that she is not prepared to be bounced by these threats. Now, that's a pretty, it's a risky route to take for her. There is some serious disagreement, serious ill feeling towards those Chequers proposals. We've seen, of course, these two resignations of Brexit big beasts in David Davis and Boris Johnson, but all indications from Number 10 that as things stand, Theresa May is preparing to fight this out. She defended the Chequers proposal. She said that it was not a betrayal. She said it was the right Brexit. And when pushed and challenged by Jeremy Corbyn, she pushed that back as well. Now, some people suggesting that that tone, if you like, was reminiscent of during the election campaign last year when there was that U-turn on social care policy, and she repeated the phrase, nothing has changed, suggestions that perhaps this is Theresa May in full robotic mode, not necessarily reacting and responding to the reality of the situation that is facing her at all possible angles. But nonetheless, having spoken just a moment ago to a Downing Street official, it seems that this is a very intentional position. She is intending to try and face down this rebellion and hang on.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Tom. I should just say I know viewers find it irritating. It's a free country. People come and demonstrate. They may think whether they help their cause by disturbing the many more people who are watching at home, but that's where we are. Let's go to our Europe correspondent, Mark Stone, who joins us now from Brussels. And we've had some reaction now from the presidents of the European Union. Mark.
Yes, no demonstrators here, Adam, but a good degree of bewilderment at what is happening, what is unfolding in Westminster. It was, in fact, during a news conference with the Ukrainian president that I broke the news to both the president of the European Commission and European Council, Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker, that Boris Johnson had resigned. Mr. Tusk was just reacting to the news that David Davis had resigned. He was saying that politicians come and go, but the work of negotiating goes on. I then told them that Boris Johnson had gone too, and here was their reaction. Gentlemen, can I just ask one more question? Boris Johnson has just announced he's resigned. I wondered if I could get your view on that, sir. Forgive me, President Poroshenko, I realise this is somewhat of a domestic issue, but the British Foreign Secretary resigned.
This clearly proves that at Chequers there was unity in the cabinet.
I'm very sorry, this concludes the
I can just repeat what I say about David Davis just 1 minute ago.
But this surely is a bit of a blow. The British Foreign Secretary resigning, the Brexit Secretary resigning. What does this mean for Europe?
This clearly proves that at Chequers there was a big unity of views in the British cabinet.
I think there's no question, though, Adam, that this is a very delicate moment now, clearly in Westminster, but in Brussels as well, because the one thing that they do not want to see here in Brussels is the collapse of the British government, because that, they believe, would hasten a no-deal scenario, a cliff edge, and that is, well, many people believe catastrophic for the UK, but would be particularly bad for Europe as well. They don't want to hasten the chances of that. I've been speaking on background to a number of both EU sources and British sources over the course of the day, British negotiators as well who work here in Brussels. Clearly, they are as bewildered as anyone else at the news of David Davis's departure and now that of Boris Johnson. But one person was clear to me, a Brit, was quite clear that it's better it happens now than happens in a few months' time. The sooner that we can clear up any disagreement within the British government now, the easier the job is for the British negotiators to get on with negotiating. So if there are any more resignations to come in the days or days ahead, they should happen soon. Certainly that is the view of the British negotiators here, whose job is getting harder and harder by the day. One more thing briefly to add. It's interesting to note that the first EU leader who will meet Theresa May since the torrid day that she's had is the Austrian Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz. He is new to his job. He's flying to the UK tonight for meetings, pre-arranged meetings with Theresa May. Interesting to note, his view on Brexit is slightly more conciliatory than some others like Emmanuel Macron, the French president. OK, Mark Stone, thank you very much indeed. So the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, has resigned. He's been replaced by Dominic Raab. The Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, has resigned. We're waiting for a statement from him. More in the next hour.